And the place that I'm going to start, I mean, I've written the book, Why Do We Still Have the Electoral College, is in some sense a chronicle of the very many attempts that have been made to reform or abolish the Electoral College. And when I say very many, more constitutional amendments have been introduced on this subject than on any other in the history of the United States. The number, it's a little hard to be precise, the number is somewhere between 900 and 1,000, and constitutional amendments began to be introduced roughly 10, 12 years after the Constitution itself was written. So let me start out by talking about some of the things that people were dissatisfied with in the past, and then make a few comments also about some things that we've seen in the last couple of months, that some additional problems that have made people queasy. And I think the place to start with the original problem is this: it has to do with the evolution towards what we call winner take all now, or sometimes called the unit rule, that in most states, all but 2 states, that the winner of the popular vote gets all of the state's electoral votes. As Kyle mentioned, that's not in the Constitution. And according to many of the framers who were there, including James Madison, that's not what people had in mind. They thought that, in fact, for one thing, in a number of states, there would not be a popular election. And they let the wording of the Constitution leaves it up to the state legislature to decide whether or not there will be a popular election. And state legislatures have autonomy about that, at least up until the moment that an election is held. And in fact, I think it's correct that Rhoda and other people here are based in New Jersey. Well, Kyle, if you're in Fairleigh Dickinson, you are based in New Jersey. There was a famous instance in 1812 where New Jersey had scheduled a popular election for president, but then it looked like it was going to go in a way that the legislature was not happy with, so they canceled the election, actually, a couple of weeks before, and the legislature chose its own electors. Now, I grew up in New Jersey, so I'm familiar with some of the rough edges of New Jersey politics, and that probably wouldn't surprise anyone. But in effect, what happens is that the system that we call winner take all, which became dominant by the late 1830s, emerged as a result of partisan conflict, precisely out of the appearance of the political parties that Kyle referred to, and that were not anywhere on the radar screens of the framers when they wrote the Constitution. The emergence of political parties led to attempts to try to game the system. You saw signs of this in the 1790s already, serious signs of this. And then it comes to a head, in a sense, in the election of 1800. The election of 1800 was a rematch between John Adams and Thomas Jefferson. Adams had won narrowly in the Electoral College in 1796. And he had benefited from 1 or 2 electoral votes from Virginia, because Virginia used a district system to choose its electors. And the Virginia legislature didn't want that to happen again. So they passed a new law in 1800, before the elections, saying that Virginia would now cast its electoral votes winner take all, which would guarantee that Jefferson got all of the electoral votes of Virginia. Shockingly, Massachusetts, the home of John Adams, decided to retaliate and do the same thing. And in a sense, they were then off to the races as one state after another converted to winner take all or to legislative choice. And it was really chaos for the next 20 or 25 years as states changed the way they chose electors. And everybody disapproved of winner take all. Pretty much everybody disapproved of winner take all, but no states really wanted to permanently back away from it. There were 4 constitutional amendments that passed the Senate between 1815 and 1825 that would have done away with winner take all and required that electors be chosen by in district and by popular vote, and anyway, passed the Senate 4 times, and on one of those occasions, it came within a couple of votes of getting the 2/3 majority needed in the House. So we came very, very close during this early period, and ever since then, winner take all has always been a periodic source of contention. We also know in more modern times, a lot of the emphasis has been on the fact that the system that we have with winner take all deforms electoral campaigns. I mean, you know, as we know, I mean, the presidential elections usually take place in 8 to 10 states where the outcome is not certain, and there's not a whole lot of point for anybody to campaign anyplace else or to address issues of other areas. Another dimension of the Electoral College, which people began to dislike as early as the 1790s, was having human electors, having these individuals who were originally envisaged as being local notables who would have more political experience and more judgment, than they would meet and deliberate in the state electoral colleges and express their wisdom in that way. That never happened. They never did that. They became by 1800. They were messengers. That's all they were. And there were numerous proposals to try to get rid of them as messengers. A third dimension, it has to do, and Kyle mentioned this, the contingent election system, which is, if nobody wins a majority of electoral votes, the presidential election goes to the House. But it doesn't just go to the House. It goes to the House, where the House decision will be made with each state getting 1 vote. It's not proportional to population. North Dakota and California have the same voice if it goes to a contingent election. And by the early 1820s, everybody seemed to agree that it was an abomination, a view that has prevailed. Even Mitch McConnell thinks it's an abomination and favors getting rid of it. But the contingent election system hasn't been used since 1824, so it's not reviewed. It hasn't been viewed recently as an urgent item on the agenda. Although, if there are people in the audience who, like myself, but possibly not Kyle, are old enough to remember the 1892 election. No, I'm sorry, not the 1890. Even I don't remember the 1892 election, but I do remember the 1992 election, when Ross Perot was running as a third candidate, and it looked like he might run as a very strong third candidate, and there was a flurry of activity then to possibly change the contingent system. Yet another problem with the Electoral College, of course, is the possibility of producing what has recently been called the wrong winner. The person who wins the electoral vote doesn't win the popular vote. This sort of happened a couple of times, and I can explain this sort of if people want to ask the question. In the 19th century, it happened definitely in 1888. And then we have our 2 recent experiences with that. And also, finally, by the late 19th century, and very much in the 20th century, the Electoral College has been criticized really for essentially being not democratic, that it does not conform to the principle of 1 person, 1 vote, which most of us really think is a fundamental democratic principle. My vote should count about the same as yours, and yours should count about the same as mine. So all of these problems, these problematic features, have been present and visible. And they have led to numerous efforts to try to get rid of it. The most in living memory, again, for some of us, but in more recent history, we came extremely close to getting rid of the Electoral College, not just in 1821, but in 1970. It's a little known but very important piece of history that in 1969, the House of Representatives approved a constitutional amendment for a national popular vote. We did Electoral College have a national popular vote, and the House approved that by a vote with an 82% vote. I mean, you think about how difficult it is to get even a majority vote often. I mean, it'd be hard to get 82% vote on what time it is in the House of Representatives now. But it approved that amendment by 82% vote. It then went to the Senate, where it was stalled by Southern senators. I'll come back to this in a minute. It was stalled by Southern senators for a year, during a year when regional and racial tensions were very, very high. This is from the fall of 1969 into the fall of 1970. And then eventually the Southerners, with a little help from a Nebraska Republican named Roman Ruska, if anyone remembers that name, mounted a filibuster in the Senate to prevent it from being passed. It had the support of about 57, 58, maybe as many as 60 senators, but they could not get to the number needed to overcome a filibuster, and it was defeated. But that's how close we came to adopting a national popular vote in my lifetime, and in the lifetimes of some of you folks in the audience.